What if I told you that Ferrari has discovered something in Hamilton's driving that could completely change how you win in modern Formula One? Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Because we're not talking about pure speed or aerodynamics or even the engine. We're talking about something much more invisible, much more difficult to detect, the way in which Hamilton manages energy lap after lap. And the most shocking thing is not only that it works, it's that Ferrari believes that this secret could explain why some cars disappear at the end of a straight line, while others simply fly away. The big question is, are we facing a legal advantage that no one else has been able to copy, or has Ferrari just uncovered something that could force everyone to change the way they compete? What Ferrari has begun to understand after the Chinese Grand Prix is not simply an improvement in Lewis Hamilton's performance. It is a much deeper revelation that changes the way driving is interpreted in today's Formula One, because for the first time they are seeing clearly that performance is not only in the car, but in how the driver interacts with the energy system in every meter of the circuit. For years, the teams have worked under a fairly clear logic: maximize energy recovery during braking and deploy it on the straight in the most aggressive way possible, always looking for that peak of speed that makes the difference. But what Ferrari has detected in Hamilton completely breaks with that pattern, because he does not drive thinking about isolated moments, but rather about complete cycles of energy, where each decision in the curve directly affects what will happen several seconds later on the next straight. And this is where the first key point that is impacting the paddock appears. Hamilton is not simply recovering energy. He is preparing it. He is managing it with a precision that allows the car to reach the critical areas with a more useful, more usable level of charge, avoiding that phenomenon that is generating so many problems in this new generation of single-seaters, the dreaded super clipping, where the energy runs out before finishing the straight, and the car obviously loses. Acceleration. Ferrari has identified that this problem is not only technical, but also driving, because while many drivers try to squeeze the car in each phase without thinking about the overall balance, Hamilton adjusts his style in a much more intelligent way, modulating the use of the accelerator, managing the transitions between braking and traction, and even adapting his cornering to maintain energy efficiency that then translates into pure performance when it really matters. In fact, this fits perfectly with what had already been seen since his arrival at Ferrari, where he began to modify his style to get closer to more efficient driving in curves, releasing the accelerator earlier and using the brake more progressively, something that not only improves the minimum speed, but also directly influences how the hybrid system recovers energy, creating a much more solid base for the next section of the circuit. The problem for Ferrari is that this discovery comes at a time where they themselves recognize that they have a deficit in converting that energy into real speed, especially in qualifying, which explains why, despite having a competitive car in corners, they continue to lose time on the straight against rivals like Mercedes, where efficiency and energy deployment seems to be at another level. And this is where the analysis becomes even more interesting, because what Ferrari is seeing in Hamilton is not just an adaptation, it is a possible solution to one of the biggest problems of this hybrid era, a clue on how to close that gap that separates the teams that simply have energy from those that know exactly how to use it at the perfect moment. But this opens up an even bigger question, because if Hamilton is already doing this now, with a car that still does not maximize that potential, what will happen when Ferrari manages to fully align its technical package with this way of driving? But all this brings us to the point where the problem really begins for the rest of the teams, because what Ferrari has discovered is not just an advanced driving technique, it is a window to an advantage that is not yet fully exploited, and that is what generates the true impact within the paddock. Because when you analyze in depth what Hamilton is doing, you realize that it is not just about avoiding super clipping, but about something much more sophisticated. It is altering the natural balance between recovery and energy deployment, ensuring that the car not only maintains performance on the straight, but does so in a more constant, more stable, and above all, more predictable way lap after lap. And this is key because in today's Formula One, one of the biggest problems is not how much thrust you have, but when you have it, since the system is limited by regulations with very clear figures of recoverable and usable energy per lap, which means that all teams, in theory, play with the same cards, but Hamilton is showing that the difference is not in the cards, but in how they are played. Ferrari has begun to see that its problem is not just one of power or aerodynamics, but of synchronization, of how the behavior of the car is connected to the use of energy. And this is where a factor comes in that can change everything, the interaction between driving and the energy maps of the car, something that in 2026 will be even more critical due to the greater weight of the electrical component. What is happening is that Hamilton seems able to perfectly align his style with those maps, making the car run in a kind of optimum zone for longer, avoiding unnecessary consumption peaks and maximizing each phase of the energy cycle, something that not only improves speed, but reduces the losses that other teams are suffering without fully understanding why. And this is where the real concern begins, because if this is replicable, if Ferrari manages to translate this behavior into data, into adjustments, into technical development, then we would not be talking about a simple incremental improvement, but rather a structural advantage, something that could be maintained circuit after circuit, regardless of the conditions. But there is another element that adds even more tension to all this, and that is that in parallel to this situation, the FIA is already focusing on aspects such as the hot compression ratio and other engine parameters that could be indirectly influencing how energy is generated and used, which means that the room for maneuver-defined gray advantages is increasingly reduced. This leaves Ferrari in a very delicate, but at the same time very promising position, because they now have two paths. Either they manage to fully understand what Hamilton is doing and turn it into a strength of the car, or they stay halfway, with a driver capable of extracting more than what the car can offer consistently. And this is where everything fits, where what seemed like just a difference in driving begins to become a real threat for the entire grid, because Ferrari is no longer seeing Hamilton as a driver who adapts to the car, but as a key piece to redefine how the car should work in this new energy era. Because if something has become clear after this analysis, it is that Formula One is no longer won solely with more power or better aerodynamics. It is won by understanding how to transform each unit of energy into real performance. And Hamilton is showing that that limit has not yet been reached, that there is still room, but only for those who know how to find it. Ferrari now has a unique opportunity before it, because for the first time they are not only pursuing technical improvements, they are deciphering a driving pattern that can be directly integrated into the development of the car, aligning engineering and driving in the same direction, something that has historically been one of the keys to the great dominance cycles in Formula One. And this is where the situation becomes even more dangerous for its rivals, because if Ferrari manages to eliminate that deficit on the straight that they currently have, if they manage to improve efficiency in energy deployment and completely synchronize it with what Hamilton is already doing naturally on the track, then the scenario changes completely, because they would stop being a strong car in curves and become a complete package without clear weak points. The most striking thing is that this advantage would not be something specific. It would not depend on a specific circuit or specific conditions. It would be a structural improvement, something replicable, something that could be maintained throughout the season. And that is where the alarms begin to go off in the rest of the teams. Because while some continue to look for solutions in the engine, in aerodynamics, or in visible updates, Ferrari could be advancing in something much more difficult to copy: the perfect connection between driver and energy system, a level of optimization that is not purchased, not installed, it is built. And the big question that remains in the air is inevitable. If Hamilton has already shown that it can be done, and Ferrari is beginning to understand how to do it, and in the end, it all comes down to an idea that completely changes the way we understand current Formula One. The car that has the most energy doesn't win. The one that knows how to use it best wins. Ferrari has discovered that there is something different in Hamilton's driving, something that is not seen in superficial data, something that does not appear in traditional comparisons, but that does translate into real performance when it matters most, in those moments where other cars run out of drive, and he continues to advance. The truly shocking thing is that this is not an improvement that depends on an update or a new part. It is knowledge, it is interpretation, it is a different way of understanding the car, and that is much more difficult to copy than any technical innovation. Now, Ferrari is at that critical point where everything can change, because they have already seen the problem, they have already identified the opportunity, but they need to take the next step, convert that reading of Hamilton into a tangible advantage, into constant performance, into a real evolution of the car. And if they achieve it, they will not only be closing the gap they have now, they will be anticipating the future of Formula One, because in an era where energy is everything, whoever dominates its management will dominate the championship. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.